Barnaby Jones will return next Thursday night at 10, 9 Central and Mountain on most of these stations.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
This Superman portrait is really a send-up of the original Fleischer cartoon intro, where you saw a quick explanation of the destruction of Krypton, the rocket ship coming to Earth, and the pose of Superman with fists on hips, where he's kind of looking down a little bit. This is an exaggeration of that, where I'm getting my traditional kind of Alex Ross low angle looking up the body kind of shot, which again I'll credit to Neil Adams as an influence. This is really just connecting with the most fundamental kind of influence in my life from that cartoon shaping the way that I illustrate Superman. It also connects in ways I'd never even thought about when I was doing the piece with one of the most famous images that Steve Rude did in World's Finest of Superman, where he kind of recreated that Fleischer moment with his painted figure of Superman, and then I would spend the rest of my career pretty much doing what he did before me.
Welcome back, everybody. Time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Josh Williamson is back, just like he promised.
Yeah, of course.
Dark Crisis was wrapped up. He's like, all right, I'll be back, and I got new stuff to talk about. So, the floor's open to talk about Dark Crisis, anything you want to talk about, everybody, but also Superman, Green Arrow, Bane, One Bad Day, Batman.
Oh, yeah.
So, man, congrats. Honest, I was telling you off the air, I thought you stuck the landing with Dark Crisis, truly.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that means a lot to hear that. I mean, I definitely have, as we were talking about before we started, I have a lot of opinions on events, and I feel like now that I've done one like Dark Crisis, I have a lot of thoughts on it. And it was funny, like the moment we finished it off, I immediately was like, here are all the things I would do differently next time. It was like, here are all the things that I would totally change up about it. It's funny with events because I've always been kind of an advocate for faster events. Like I always feel like, dating back years and years at DC, I've always been like, I wish we did events faster. And I say that, but then I come on and do Dark Crisis and it's basically a year long. So, but then that's the funny thing in my brain is I'm like, oh man, I wish I had more issues. Like that would be my only, not regret. Regret's the wrong word. I feel like sometimes we took 12 issues worth of material and we shoved it into 7. And so that's the thing sometimes that, I think about, but I'm seeing these comments. I'm glad you love Dark Crisis, and I feel like it was me. When I was doing Flash, I had something to say about Flash. When about Barry Allen, and when
Absolutely.
I was on Robin, I had something to say about Damian. And every time I'm on a book, I have one of the characters. But with Dark Crisis, it was much more about me saying something about DC Comics. It was much more me talking about the things that made me a fan of DC Comics and stuff that got me excited and wanting to express that, but also say something about what I feel is the best version of DC.
Well, one thing that I do want to talk about, and I know the conversation happened in Tom Taylor's Nightwing 100.
Oh, yeah.
But it also dovetails out of Dark Crisis. And it was funny
yeah.
because I remember when that Death of the Justice League first issue prior to Dark Crisis came out. And you're like, no, man, the Justice League's dead. And obviously they're not dead. But I do like that the team is not, right now at least, not coming back. And that great conversation between Bruce and Dick that it's time for you to lead and it's time for the Titans to go front and center. And essentially that's what you were kind of setting the table for with Dark.
Well, it's also, part of it is like, I don't want to go backwards anymore. We go backwards a lot. And I'm guilty of this too. I can't point fingers. I got to start pointing at myself. It's like we go backwards, and it's more about going forward. And it's also about, I was talking to someone else about this, one of the retailers today about it. We had a big retailer presentation today talking about Superman. And we talked a little bit about Dark Crisis and Dawn of DC and some of the plans. And it's about, it is about going backwards, and it's not about necessarily just rebuilding. It's about building something new, right? And it's about trying something different. And that was sort of the idea with a lot of the conversation we had about Justice League and about Nightwing and the Titans. And, I hope everyone's read the End of Dark Crisis. We are going to talk about spoilers, and we're going to talk about what's going on in Nightwing 100 as well. 'Cause that just came out too this week.
Right.
But yeah, Tom Taylor and I, we're friends, and so we talk fairly often. And we had met up with each other at different conventions over the year, and we had talked a lot about this. And we had a couple different conversations. And again, because he's working on John Kent while I work on Clark, and with doing the Superman book.
Yep.
We just talked a lot about what was going to happen with the Justice League, because to me, and this was very early on, it was like, there is no Justice League, right? I kept saying that over and over again. I think people thought I was joking, but in my head, I knew at the ending, Batman was going to say that line. He was going to say there is no Justice League. And we kept having these conversations about what does that mean going forward. And it did kind of mean like, well, does that just mean that these characters suddenly become the Justice League? Does all these Titans characters suddenly become the Justice League? And it was like, no, I think we should try something different. Because that was the expected thing too. It was really funny, dude. The amount of people that were like, they would come up to me at conventions and be like, I know you're writing Justice League next. And I'm like, oh, I'm not writing Justice League. I'm sorry, I'm not, because there is no Justice League.
Well, Josh, I'm ready to continue, but we've all been on the ride so many times. I mean, again, I'm likely the oldest person on this conversation and watching and listening to this.
Yeah,
so let me say that. Yeah, man, and I understand you feel like we're going backward, but it's like, no, that's what happens. There's a big event, everything happens, and then we pick up and move on. There's a new creative team on Justice League, and there's new energy that way. But this is something. I have a good friend who is the biggest Nightwing fan ever.
Oh yeah.
Like, when is Dick Grayson? He is a full-fledged adult now. When is his time? And there have been little moments here and there, Grant's story when Batman's unstuck in time, or other times that Dick has taken the front and center. But really, to not only have Dick be there, but really the Titans, and this was his other part of the argument, and the Titans are all adults now too. When is their time? When are they the marquee like they were in the 80s? When did they get that opportunity again?
People forget about that. You go back and you look at the early 80s, and it's like, there's a reason. There is a reason there is a Teen Titans X-Men crossover, right? Because those were the two big books.
Absolutely.
Those were the big hitters at the time.
Yep.
Which, by the way, that comic is awesome.
It is. I know. I've talked to Walter about that.
Dude, that book, so good, so good. I used to have it on my desk for a while. It's so good. But there's a reason why that was going on, because that was the book. That was it. And I think a lot of those characters kind of got shuffled to the side over the years. And I was like, let's try something different. And so Tom and I talked a lot about it. And I think he was the first person. No, he was. He was the very first person to read that scene between Bruce and Dick in Dark Crisis. Like, I sent it to him while he was working on Nightwing 100, and we had talked about it ahead of time, so it was like a surprise to him. But I was like, "Here's what I'm doing," and then he went and did 100 and helped set up, I think, this new status quo that we're trying to do in the DCU.
I like it, man. I like it a lot. I also we'll get into Superman, and Zach beat me to it, but essentially saying what I was going to tell you, and that is he loved the Lex stuff in Action 1050, and he loved the angle you've taken with the story and made their rivalry personal in a way that it hasn't felt in a while. Yeah, I mean, Lex, the world, the genie's back in the bottle. Clark's identity is back.
Yeah.
Lex knows, and I love that Lex knows, because it brings back in a different way that Silver Bronze Age thing. I don't know if you ever read Elliot Maggins' Last Son of Krypton novel.
No,
but it's great because it echoes the Silver Age, where these guys have known each other since they were kids. They used to be friends.
Well, that's a continuity I go with.
Well, I mean, I
look at you look at when Jeff and Gary Frank did Secret Origin of Superman, they established they knew each other. And we actually touched on this in the first issue. We touched on this in Action 1050. In my opinion, they knew each other, right? That's my continuity. They knew each other, right? And I always wanted to dig deeper into that. And there's stuff we do dig into. One of the things we talk a little bit about in Superman that's a big part of it is there was a time where Lex left Smallville and went to Metropolis, and was in Metropolis for a long time before Clark got there. And I want to explore that time period a little bit with Lex.
Fantastic.
I love Lex Luthor, and I love writing Lex, and I really back when I got the job, I had just written Lex in Batman, and again, I've always liked him as a character. Like I have his voice in my head, and so having him, when I got the job and I was trying to figure out my pitch, and I knew something that I felt had been missing from Superman for a while was Superman versus Lex. Like, and I know Brian touched on it a bit, but it was more Superman family versus Legion of Doom, and it was Apex Lex. There was a lot of big stuff happening. I wanted to get down to Clark and Lex and that dynamic, and how I think that a lot of times Clark feels like Lex is the one person he let down, right? I mean, obviously Clark has a lot of other feelings on things, but there's a line in the first issue where he talks about this, where it's like, I feel like he's the one person that I kind of didn't save, right?
Yeah.
Like, and let him down. And I think that's something Lois kind of says. She's like, no, Lex let Lex down, right? Like, that's the truth. You didn't do anything. Lex is Lex, but Superman is the kind of person, Clark sees the best in everyone, and he wants the best for everybody, and he sees that heart, and he sees that humanity. And I think with Lex, there's two things going on with it, where it's like he looks at Lex and he sees this piece of him that should have been better, right? But there's also a part of Clark that is internalizing not guilt, but a kind of like disappointment.
Yeah,
right?
regret.
Twofold. Yeah, regret. Yeah, exactly. It's regret.
Absolutely.
And so I wanted to play with those ideas. And when I got the job, it was funny because Philip and Tom Taylor knew they were going to offer it to me before they offered it to me, right? And that was actually a big piece of it. Was I was like, well, I really love what Philip's doing, and I consider them both like good friends. And so I was like, let's, I want to come in here and all of us work together. And then DC started coming to us with, doing the Secret Identity. And so we had a lot of conversations about it. It was like me, Tom, and Philip. We talked about it a lot. And I remember having breakfast with Philip at MegaCon, talking about it and talking about what we were going to do. And I actually pitched him my whole thing on Lex, and he pitched me the stuff he was going to do with Metallo. And we talked about the Secret Identity thing. At one point, there was a conversation about being a Mixoplic thing. And I was like, no. Like, they just did that. That was how they did it the last time. That's how they put this back last time. And I knew, because I was thinking about what Brian had done with Clark. And, the idea that him revealing his secret identity and revealing his truth was so important to Clark. And I was like, I don't think it wouldn't feel right just like magically putting this into a bottle. I think the idea that Lex Luthor steals it, right? Lex Luthor steals it is such a Lex thing. Once we started talking about that, it was like, okay, this is how we do this. And I really like writing Lex and Clark together. And yeah, if you've read Action 1050, all the Dragata pages are my pages. And that's the big emotional moment between the two of them. That was all me. And I remember the way we did that issue, I have a whiteboard. I have many whiteboards in my office, but I basically, we talked a bunch of stuff out, and then we broke the issue. We made a document, and I remember telling those guys, like, this is the scene I have to write. Like, I have to write the confrontation between the two of them. And I knew it was going to be a really emotional scene, and I really like writing emotional scenes. So I was like, I got to write this part. And then we went back and forth a lot of stuff, and those guys really nailed it, where it was like Philip really nailed the stuff with Lex and Manchester Black. And of course, like, Tom really nailed all the stuff on the farm with John. But then later in the issue where John is the happy one, he's happy about the secret identity, like that was all Tom. And but yeah, I really like writing Lex a lot, and that plays a major part of the Superman book that's coming out in February, is that relationship. Let's see, we're going to be able to read fully via all right, cool. Yeah,
I'm gonna let the audio audience know when they hear this. Jake lets everybody know that Dark Crisis is available to read in full via DC Universe's Infinite Ultra tier. All right, then.
Yeah, all right.
Good to know.
Thank
I
you
bought
for,
the issues. I bought the digital issues. Velvet wants to know, Velvet Intrigue, is Clark Kent as Superboy back in continuity, going back?
Oh man, I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble for this. Here's my answer to this question. As far as I'm concerned, yes. Like, it's in issue 1. We show it in issue 1. We show him as Superboy in issue 1. So I mean,
there you go.
Listen, I'm using I definitely try to be a little bit conscious of continuity, and I can sometimes cherry pick, because his continuity is so deep, it goes on for so long. But to me, I look at something like again, Secret Origin is probably the
Yes,
one the
Jeff's
most is
Jeff's
that
version of
yeah,
Superman.
he was Superboy. I don't think
Yeah.
I mean I wonder. I feel like I should text Mark Waid and ask him, be like, in your opinion, was he, if I text him right now, Mark would probably call me and be like, what are you talking about? Of course he was.
Well, and also regarding Lex and Clark's dynamic,
Mhm.
I've said this a million times on this show. The end of Kingdom Come, when they're at Planet Krypton,
Yeah.
and they're just all checking in with each other. And Clark asks Bruce, "How's Luthor?" And he goes, "Oh, I caught him trying to hack into the Batcave
Yeah.
computer the other day." And he goes, "He says hello." And
Yeah.
that looked at Alex Ross Gibbs is, really? And Bruce is like,
Yeah.
no, no, and it's like, yeah,
Wow.
dummy, no, man. And it's because, like you said, Superman looks forward to that day where Lex finally goes, I've been an asshole. I'm sorry.
Well, that is a little bit of what my book is about, is Lex, but it's in Lex's way, right? Like Lex is like,
Absolutely. He knows
he's
he's
like,
right.
I'm here to help. I'm here to help you, big dummy. Like that's
Oh, interesting.
yeah. Well, that's how it is with him in the book because
Okay. Intriguing.
Lex, and this talks about in 1050 where Lex is like, I'm gonna make you a better Superman, right? Like, he's I'm gonna fix you. That was actually a big part of what I clicked in my head with Lex, is like Lex thinks he can improve upon Superman. He thinks he can make a better Superman. Which we know this though, because of the stuff he's done with Bizarro, the things he's done, or even where he put on the armor, all this stuff has always been about him wanting to be Superman. But I think he looks at Clark and he's like, listen, the world needs you. But if they're gonna have you, they're gonna have my version.
My version of
Like,
you.
I'm gonna make you the best version you can. So even though Lex is in prison in the book, he still believes that, and he's still trying to, in his own way, help Clark. Whether or not Clark wants it, obviously we'll have to see what happens with that. But that's a major part of the book. I mean, really, the book, obviously Lois and Jimmy are there. I have a lot of plans for Lois and Jimmy. A lot of fun stuff. I mean, that's one thing with this book. I feel like the animated series is probably the closest in terms of tone for what I'm going for.
Great.
But it is a lot about Clark and Lex and the kind of dynamic they have and the back and forth of this kind of antagonistic. We know it's antagonistic between them, but I think there's a part of Clark that's like, of course he's going to try to save Lex. I mean, there's no way Clark can ever let like Lex down. And it goes beyond just because they knew each other when they were young. It's that idea that like, I think that Clark wants he wants the best for humanity. And at the end of the day, Lex is still part of that. And so he has to try, he can't give up on Lex is basically what it comes down to,
I understand.
And that's the actual line is he's like, I feel like I gave up on Lex, and Lois was like, Lex gave up on Lex, and so that's a major part of the book. Yeah.
That sounds great, man. Honestly, I love it. And again, because I implore you to read. Elliot got the rights back to it, Last Son of Krypton, the novel, and he sells it now. I'm thrilled that Warner's allowed this to happen. That book and Miracle Monday. I think Wade's more of a Miracle Monday guy than I am, but I like Last Son of Krypton. And yeah, there's just this great like period in the book where the two of them are trapped. And Lex is the one that saves them. And again, it's like all this stuff about, well, remember in Smallville this, and it's like, and there's this great inner monologue of Superman, like, oh man, he used to be my friend. We know each other. Who knows Superman more other than Lois than Lex?
Oh yeah, yeah. I had pitched a Superman story, God, I think now almost like 4 years ago, and it was a lot about Clark and Lex, and it ended up not happening, but a lot of the ideas I had for that actually ended up informing this of what we're doing over here. But and also like Jamal Campbell's drawing it. You gotta, dude, I can't wait for you to see Jamal's art. It is insane. It's really beautiful. Like
is this
yeah, that's the cover. So that's the issue 1 wraparound cover, and it actually has a lot of clues in it as well. There's some, like, you could tell Parasite's there and Livewire is there, and Bizarro and Silver Banshee, because they're all going to play major roles in the book. And in the back, we have a couple of clues. Obviously Perry and Lois and Jimmy. There's a couple new characters there, and in the very back, we have 2 of the new villains that are coming in the first issue. And,
oh, cool.
Yeah, we have a bunch of cool stuff. It's funny that today I've been talking about this book a lot, and I worry about spoiling too much. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff coming. We have 2 new villains in the first issue, another new character in the second, and there's just a lot of. For me, I think with Superman, I really wanted to take the iconic pieces, right? So grab all the iconic pieces that we love of Superman, put them on the table, right? And then play with them. But then I wanted to add new toys and new things to the mythology. And that meant taking some of the villains that I really like and leveling them up or playing with them in new ways. And then it was also about taking and adding a couple new villains to the math. I think that Batman, I love Batman, but it's funny sometimes with Batman where it's like Batman gets all the toys, like all the toys, and I mean that in story, and I mean it in actual like the real world, right? Where it's like, McFarlane makes so many Batman toys, and I know why, I get it, and it's funny as I say this, I have like probably like 24 Batman black and white statues on the other side of my computer, right? Like there's a lot of Batman stuff. With Superman, I was like, let's give Superman some more toys, right? Let's give him more stuff that people can play with, and that involves just, maybe some different looks and maybe some new villains and just having some fun with it. It's like Grant one time said that Batman can be a vehicle for any kind of story. You can take Batman and drop Batman in any kind of story, and it'll work, right? I think Superman is the same. I know there's challenges there because of his power set, but there's so much you can do, and you could be so imaginative and creative with that character. And we've seen that over the last 85 years, right? You can see
100%.
how many different kinds of Superman stories you can tell. And so for me with this book, it was, I'm leaning definitely, like I said, a little animated series, a little more pulpy, like but my dad was a huge fan of Doc Savage, so I grew up with Doc Savage books in the house and stuff. And that's why sometimes I feel like I'm one of the few people that recognize that Bane is actually this evil Doc Savage. That's a whole other thing we can talk about.
That's a great idea. I never thought of
that.
No,
he is. No, you understand. No, dude, Bane is evil Doc Savage. You know this because of their sidekicks. If you ever look at a picture of Doc Savage and his crew, right, and then look at Bane and his crew with Bird and Zombie, and I think it's Trog, they match up because Bane was, supposed to be evil Doc Savage. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But I want to take Superman and tell a bit more of a pulpy Superman story, but also use different genres. So do some horror, do some romance, do some westerns, do some stuff that you would not expect from a Superman book, while also not leaving Metropolis too much.
When you say do some westerns, and you don't have to answer on this, but oh my God, is it possible that Terra Man can suddenly find
that's so funny. You were the second person to bring up Terra Man to me in the last month. You're the second person. Dude,
come on, man.
We'll talk later. We'll talk later about Terra Man. No, dude, because Terra Man's come up a couple times for a variety of reasons. There's a new character we're creating in Green Arrow. Oh man, I might get into some Green Arrow spoilers by accident. We're creating a new character in Green Arrow that's like just a new character we're kind of introducing, and they might have some similarities too. Oh yeah, so that's not the cover. That is actually a 2-page spread that's in the first issue where we talk a bit about like the history of who Oliver Queen is.
Okay.
If you scroll down a little bit more on my Twitter, you can find the cover. I think we did.
Fair enough. All right, I love this shot though. That's why I grabbed it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, that's also Sean Isaac. It's amazing. He's doing a really good job with it.
Looks incredible.
What's crazy about that, like, so on Green Arrow, I wanted to write Green Arrow like my entire life, and it never came together. Like this was a known thing at DC. It never came together. And then over the last couple of years, there's been a couple like almost Green Arrow books that would come together, and then they wouldn't happen for whatever reason. There was a time where I had 3 friends all wanting to do a Green Arrow book all at the same time, and it just did not work out. But while we were on Dark Crisis, there was so much of the stuff with Green Arrow, and I had been working with so much of the Green Arrow family over the last couple of years. Like I brought back Roy from the dead. I brought back Connor Hawk, who had been gone for almost 15 years, I think, or since New 52. So not 15 years, but it had been a while, right? Yeah. Like I was bringing all these pieces back in, but I wasn't really writing Ollie. And then, we just kept having these different conversations. And at one point, we were going to do a Green Arrow reunion in Dark Crisis, and then we ran out of room. And it was a situation where it was like, do I shove an entire Green Arrow family into 2 panels, or do we do a book? And we had talked about potentially doing a one shot, and then it was like, as we were talking about it, it was like, no, let's do a whole book with this. And me and the editor Ben Abernathy, we were talking about artists, and we were like, who do you want, and he brought up Sean Isaac, and I was like, I love Sean Isaac stuff. He did this two-parter with Dan Slott on Fantastic Four a few years ago, where it was the Thing and the Hulk fighting on the Thing's honeymoon, and it's one of my favorite parters in recent memory. I love it, and it's beautiful. It's like a beautiful 2-issue story that is like, it's great. All the emotions are there. The action is there. I think it's one of the best 2 issues I've read in a while. And I think it's one of the better parts of Dan Slott's whole Fantastic Four run. Those 2 issues are so good, and so I've been a big fan of his, and he knew this. We talked about it, and he was a fan of Robin.
Oh, that's great.
So Ben Abernathy were at a bar, and Ben emails him and is like, are you interested in, like, what we're sitting there? He's like, I'll email him right now. So emails him, was like, are you interested in Green Arrow? Would you like to do something with Green Arrow? And I mean, we're talking about like not even 5 minutes later, he emailed back and he was like, are you kidding? Yes, I would love to, please. What we found out was for Sean Isaac, it was like 1 a.m. He was about to go to bed. He's getting into bed. He's like, I'm gonna check my email one more time. He looks and he sees it. And he was like, I must have already fallen asleep, because to him, that was his dream book. His dream book was doing Green Arrow.
Wonderful.
And I guess apparently he had been asking about doing a Green Arrow book for a long time as well. And so with him, it's been really awesome because he loves the character so much. And, I love the character a lot as well. And I know a lot about the character. We have a kind of shorthand. So it's like in some situations, because again, I'm such a like junkie for this stuff. It's like sometimes I'll talk to someone or an artist or an editor or somebody I'm working with about one of the characters, and I'll bring up these books that are 20 years old, 30 years old, or I'll bring up this storyline. I'm like, oh, I'm talking about like this when this happened, or there was this one issue or this happened, and then I have to explain it. But with Sean has read all those books. He's read all those Green Arrow stories. He's read all those Arsenal stories. He knows them. So when he and I talk, it's fast. It's a shorthand. So even when I'm writing the scripts, I can just I don't have to like explain everything. It's like he knows it. And also like he is actually an archer himself. So he really understands that piece of it as well. Oh yeah, it's nuts. One time we were on a call and he literally pulled up a bow and was like explaining bow stuff to me. And I'm like, this makes my life so much easier because now I don't have to like explain anything about archery to anybody. He knows it. But yeah, it's been really awesome working with him, and he really knows it really well. But I mean, same with Jamal and Superman. Like Jamal and Superman, he really knows what's up. Like, and he also really loves the character, and he really, with it, it was important to us, and this is true of I think everything post Dark Crisis. It's we really want to honor the iconic and then move the ball forward, right? Like go into the new. And when we were talking, Jamal and I were talking about Superman, that was a big piece of that for both of us. What it was like, you wanted to feel like the Superman you love, but also new, and moving into new and having fun, like just having fun. And I remember when the first time I saw Jamal's art on it, it was just, man, like Jamal just gets it, just really gets it. And he did that beautiful cover, the wraparound cover that has Superman on it and all the supporting cast. It was just nailed it. Like I feel very blessed right now to be working with all the artists I'm working with because they all are just like going for it. It's been really great. Yeah, I mean, looking at that, and I think like, yeah, Jamal just really understood what we were going for. And you could see the character, you could see personality in there, and you see Clark smiling and flying toward us. It's very much yeah, it's been really great working with him.
That's terrific, man. No, I love all these ideas. And I'm intrigued. You can or don't have to
What's up?
say where Ollie's mind is as you're getting started with the book, because there's a lot. Ollie has a lot of baggage too.
Yeah, and Ollie's without getting too deep into spoilers, but Ollie is missing Dark Crisis, right? So we established where he is very quickly, so we don't want to spend too much time on that. Like I wanted to hit the ground running. That book is a little different. And I talked about this on other podcasts before too, where it's like with Superman, to me, Superman was all about I don't want you to have to feel like you have to read anything else. Like, this is a jumping on point. You can read Superman having read nothing. You could not have read a Superman book or a DC book in years and pick that book up and be able to move forward and know what's going on, right?
Okay.
Now, with Green Arrow, on the other hand, Green Arrow is definitely a book a bit more embedded in continuity and a bit more for people who are familiar with the character and a bit more people who are fans of the character and the Green Arrow family, because there are some emotional moments in the first issue that are payoffs for things that you definitely will get more out of it if you've been a Green Arrow fan for, say the last 20 years. You might get a little bit more of the story if you are that kind of reader. But with Ollie and where Ollie's head's at, it's funny, when I was doing Flash, I did a lot of internal monologue out of Flash, because that's what you do, right? Flash books have internal monologues. And I did Flash for over 100 issues, and that was a lot of internal monologue. And when I got to the end, I was like, I'm never doing internal monologue ever again. I'm out. Which is funny, because if you look at Robin and you look at Batman and you look at Dark Crisis, there is no internal monologue going on. There's none of it. I was like, I'm out. No more internal monologue. And then when I was working on Green Arrow, I was like, okay, I think as I was figuring out the tone of it and I was figuring out the pieces, how I wanted to do it, I was like, okay, I'm going to do internal monologue, kind of, where it's a little bit more like Ollie is narrating the story even when he's not there. And that allowed me to get a little bit more of his voice in my head, but also get a bit more of his mental state, and kind of what he's going for, of this person who, this might get a little bit into spoilers, he feels sometimes like the universe has it out for him. And we get to play around with those ideas a bit about him feeling like the universe has it out for him. And then also, and this was kind of established a bit during Kevin Smith's work on the character, and same with Brad Meltzer and Judd, that, Ollie was the kind of person who didn't want to settle down. He didn't want to be a family man before. Right. I mean, that's kind of why he knew about Connor Hawke and then didn't. I mean, the fact that he lied about Connor Hawke is always like forever disappointing, right? In terms of him as a character, that he was there when Connor was born and then acted like he didn't know. I mean, that's always going to be, and that was the thing that tortured Ollie. Like, Ollie felt tortured by that fact that he had done that. And so, I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about this person who his life changed unexpectedly into a way that he didn't expect. And then how that keeps happening, why he feels the universe has it out for him, but not only for him, but for his family, and what that means. And so I wanted to play around with those ideas.
Exciting, man. Absolutely. Someone is asking about your Image series Dark Ride, and
we can talk about Dark Ride. Yeah,
absolutely. And this is him. Liam says, loved your work with Andre on Birthright and Dark Ride. You guys' deconstruction of the fantasy and horror genres. Would love to see a similar take on a sci-fi or Western book one day.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a sci-fi creator book I'm working on. I'm glad you like Birthright and Dark Ride. The Dark Ride trade paperback actually comes out in March. I'm really excited about getting that collection out there and working with Andre. Like, Andre is one of those people I'll work with forever. Like, I love working with Andre. He's my guy. I have a sci-fi creator-owned book that I've been working on for a while. I think we're 2 issues deep now. I want to make sure we have enough in the can before we announce or it comes out. But I've been working on this sci-fi book for a few years now. We put a pause on it for a bit, and then we're back with it now. Westerns, it's funny you mentioned that, because I've actually been really obsessed with John Ford lately. And so I was just watching Stagecoach the other day and 2 days ago, and I'm probably going to go on like a spaghetti Western like binge.
Oh, wow.
Pretty soon, so I've actually been thinking about Westerns a lot, and I actually started looking at some Western comics, and, I'm not sure. There's some stuff I'm working on that, again, I kind of spoiled before, that does have Western stuff going on in it. But, it has been still on my mind. Because it's funny, in film, I feel like in film for a minute there, it was like, obviously back in the day, Westerns were the most popular thing, but there was a moment there where Westerns also became they went from being the most popular thing to being very much a prestige piece, right? Whereas, like, you're talking about like Unforgiven, you're looking at Tombstone, like these pieces that are very much like these elevated movies, right? Or Western movies. And in comics, you look at something like Six Gun and all the stuff they did in the Western realm, and so it has been something on my mind lately, and I haven't cracked it yet. But I do feel like I had a Western story I pitched to an artist, and they liked it. And then they started working on another book that is incredibly successful. So I don't know if we'll ever get to that story. But even then, that wasn't cracked. It was like I kind of had it, but it wasn't quite there yet. And so I feel like at some point, it just feels like I have in my future, in my destiny, there is a Western at some point. It's also funny, and I will say this, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to anyway. I'm often warned against Westerns. It always feels like people are like, oh, Westerns don't sell or anything like that. You hear that almost everything anyway. But it's like the moment someone tells me not to do it, there's a part of my brain that's like, all right, how do I figure this out?
Sure.
There's a part of my brain that starts to head that direction. So I do think a Western is in my future. But yeah, I love playing around with genres. And I think going back to Superman, that's a big piece of that book too. It's just putting Superman through these different genres. Like that's something I'm really excited about. Like I have it in my head of how I see that book, and I'm almost impatient with it because it's like the one thing we're doing with Superman, we're doing shorter arcs. So it's like the first arc is only 3 issues long, and then we're doing a 2-issue arc, and then we'll do a 3-issue arc and the 2-issue arc. And I know some of these genre things aren't going to be for a while. It's like we're not going to get to some of the stuff I want to do until, like, I'm looking at the calendar where it's like some of the genre, playing around with the genre stuff, we'll probably start with issue 4. But because I've already written issue 5, so I'm a little ahead.
Attaboy.
But there's some genre stuff that I want to do with Superman. It's going to be a bit. I kind of wish I could do it all now. There's so many. When I started working on the book, at first I was nervous about it. Of like, I have a couple Superman ideas that I really want to do. But then it was like once the floodgates were open, it was like too many Superman ideas. It was like, oh, I could do this book for probably like 5 years. I don't think I would do that, but you never know. I mean, as long as it's selling and as long as I have ideas, I can see myself doing. Now, I really love writing it.
That's great.
Really, really fun to write. Yeah.
That's great, man. I sense another 100 issues coming.
Oh no, I would never do that again. You crazy? Never do that again. No way, dude. And that was Double Ship, so it kind of worked, but that was basically like my entire life for like 5 years. I mean, I was writing a Flash comic every 2 weeks for many years, and that was a full-time job, dude. Like that was a lot.
I want to bounce around because people keep asking great questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, this is interesting. John wants to know where readers should look for the Amanda Waller story from the very end of Dark Crisis to pick back up. And maybe they can't say yet.
Soon. I don't know if I want to ruin someone else's book. Like that would be the thing. I can talk about for me. I know the stuff that I have has Amanda Waller stuff in it. There is Amanda Waller stuff in other books.
Okay.
There is one book in particular that has a major piece that involves Amanda Waller. But yeah, Amanda Waller, the stuff with Amanda Waller will be seeded throughout the year, and I'm thinking will probably surprise you where you see it next.
Okay.
Definitely, there is a bit of where is Amanda Waller stuff going on. But yeah, I don't want to. I can talk about the stuff in my books. Like I definitely have Amanda Waller stuff going on. I know other people do, but there's one. The next time you see the next connection to Amanda Waller, it'll be a surprise.
Okay.
With most I could say without getting too deep into it.
I think that's fine, man. No. Everyone's walking through a minefield and they want to see stuff blow up, spoiler wise, and it's like, no.
Oh yeah, listen, I can spoil stuff on mine, and I can talk about mine.
Sure,
a little bit, but I would never want to like ruin someone else's ending or anything like that. Like I would feel bad doing that.
100%, buddy. Absolutely.
Yeah. Up to no good though. Let me tell you, Amanda Waller. That Amanda Waller up to no good.
Excellent, and of course she isn't.
Yeah.
Ouroboros Snake.
Oh man, Jonah Hex. I was the other night. I was actually I started doing a reread of the Palmiotti Justin Gray stuff.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
That book is so good. It's crazy how good that book is. Like you go back and you look at it and you're just like, yeah, this really worked really well.
Well, they loved it. And again, I don't know how well it sold, but thank God Dan was in charge. Yeah. And it's like, do what you want. And also inviting the cream of the crop of artists to come in and do one issue and just so many great books.
I think that's one of the reasons why on a reread, it's very rewarding. because every issue, and you get this stuff. It's really cool. Yeah, I like Jonah Hex. I'm not really sure if I have a Jonah Hex story in me. I think if I ever did do a full-on Western story, it would be something either original or without getting too much spoilers, other stuff. I don't know if I have a Jonah Hex story in me, but I do enjoy reading them. Yeah,
I get it, man. Zach wanted to know regarding Green Arrow.
Mhm.
He heard you're only getting 6 issues. Is it a finite series or is it an ongoing?
Well, we were talking about this before, like getting a Green Arrow book off the ground definitely had its, I'll say it had its challenges.
Okay.
And no matter how much I love the character, yes, to answer that question, yes. I mean, listen, like if the orders are strong and people are really happy with it, I think that can get it extended. There's no guarantees though, just to be very blunt, and be very candid with people who are listening. Um, that is the hope. That is really the hope for Sean and I, is that the orders on issue 1 are strong enough that we can get extended the same way Poison Ivy was extended last year, because Poison Ivy was originally 6 issues. And the hope is that if people really come out for that first issue, that we can get extended, to 12, and then who knows after that. It's just really going to depend on the sales. It's one of the harder things I think to talk about sometimes in comics, is how important the sales are. I think some people try to blow it away as if it's not a crucial piece, but it is. And so for something like Green Arrow, for me, schedule wise, that was part of what helped getting it going, was that I had the room in my schedule to do the 6 issues. But then once I wrote the first issue, I was like, dude, I could do this as an ongoing. And so that's really the hope. But it's like everything, it's like if it sells well, then we can keep it going. So that's really the priority. And so yeah, that is the hope. That is the hope, that if issue 1, it's part of why I'm pushing hard. Sean's going to push hard. Right now my priority is selling Superman right now, because the FOC Superman is not this Sunday, but the next one.
Oh,
Once
okay.
I get past that, once I get past the Superman FOC, then it's all about that Green Arrow FOC. It's all about getting the word out about Green Arrow. But I'll tell you, it's been really exciting to see how much people are excited about Green Arrow, because again, I've been wanting to do Green Arrow my entire life, and I had so many close calls, and it never came together until now, and it came together fast when it finally came together. That I'm really excited. It's been really nice to kind of see how pumped people are, and that they also see that we love the character, and that we really are trying to do a Green Arrow family reunion.
Excellent. I see Frog has a question regarding Green Arrow, and that is
Yeah.
on the cover, or I guess that maybe the 2-page thing. The one that's making a major return is Mia. And can I
Yeah.
expect any thing from her in your series?
Yeah, Mia will definitely return in the book. One thing with that cover, I should let people know, is that we do have a lot of characters in that cover. Not all of them are going to be in the first issue. The first issue, without getting too much into spoilers, primarily focuses on Ollie, Roy, Black Canary, and Hawk, and Connor. But that cover was like, let's get everybody that we know are coming and put them on this cover.
Okay.
As a sign to everybody, like, this is what's coming, this is what we're doing. It's kind of like a big family reunion picture. So yeah, Mia is definitely coming back.
Okay, and now I finally found that image, so I'm going to.
Oh, you see it now? Yeah, you
Yes,
see
I
how
do.
it's this big cool thing. Yeah.
So that's
yeah.
cool. You got Josh. You got to come back sooner than later and talk Green Arrow once we get past the Superman FOC.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's funny. Like, uh, with Superman, I'm really excited about Superman, and I've wanted to do a Superman book. It's just a different kind of book than Green Arrow, but it's been pretty awesome to see how excited people are for both books. And I think I think that Green Arrow, there hasn't been a Green Arrow book in a while, right? It's been a couple of years.
Yeah.
I'm really it's been really nice to see people be really excited, and DC noticed. Like, that was something that was really surprising, was that when we so I think you and I have talked before that, like, I'm not really on social media. Like, I have Twitter, but I'm not really there, and like I have an assistant and stuff like that. And so, but for me, those posts are scheduled, and then I walk away, partially because I have too much work to do.
I'm happy.
Like, so when that Green Arrow cover went up, like, I was actually dealing with home remodel stuff, and
Oh wow.
so I wasn't even in the house because it's scheduled, so it posts on its own.
Sure.
And then I had people coming and being like, "Hey, listen, this Green Arrow cover, people are really, really excited." And I actually had people from DC reach out and be like, "People are pumped." And so it was really nice to know that it wasn't just me staring at a feed or anything like that. It was like other people were picking up on, oh, people are very excited about this book. So it's been really great. Yeah, it's very exciting.
Zach has an interesting question, and I don't know
Yeah.
if you can answer this or not. Regarding sales, do digital purchases, views on the DC app, and trade sales play into the life of a book, or is it all driven by single issue sales?
It all depends. Like, I'm going to give you an example, and I'm sure this may not answer your question, but I'm going to try to answer the best of my ability. Because I quote this all the time. I talk about this all the time with people. In the Batman 1989 movie, there is a scene where Bruce is explaining that the Joker's plan wasn't one product, it was multiple products. And it is the combination of those products that created the poison, right? And I always think about this scene a lot, where it's not one thing, it's different things spread out.
A combination of
right?
everything, yes.
A combination of everything. And I think about this about comics all the time, whether it's the good things or the bad things in comics. It's never one thing, it's always things spread across. And so when you're talking about the life of a series, yes, they all can play a role, right? It all can play a role. It is all things that catches people's attention. And I think in a lot of ways that the best thing that you can do, just being really honest with you, I think surprising them. When publishers are surprised of like, oh, that did better than we thought it was going to do, that is always a big win. And so, yeah, with collections, digital, all of it, if there is some kind of uptick, it definitely all plays a role. Particularly trades, obviously, that's a big one, and
Sure.
I think especially now, and this is something we talk about now about how it's like the noise of comics. Like, there's so much noise all the time. There's so many books, so much going on. Like, every day there's something happening. It's all this noise, and it's created this like crazy valley of noise, right? And one thing I've been talking about with a few retailers is the way to tell through that noise is the trade paperback sales, because that means the hype is real. If a book sells in the collection, not just issue one, because issue one sometimes will sell a certain number because it's the number one, right?
Sure.
But then you also have gimmicks, you have variants, you have first appearances, you have all these other pieces that kind of hype things up, and then it adds to that noise in some ways. But trade paperback sales, that's when that's real. That means that readers were interested. That means that you were actually engaged. There was real hype, real buzz. That means that the story, and that's something to me, when we talk about a lot of this stuff of like what I'm doing with Superman and what I'm doing with Green Arrow, I'm really trying to sell you this story. That's really the most important thing to me. And I think when you're talking about the life of a book, it's really that, it's like, did the story pick people up? Did it get people into comic book stores? Did it get people buying it digitally? Did it get them pre-ordering trades? All that stuff. It does matter.
Well, and hopefully that's really what you guys are trying to do. I understand gimmicks. I understand number one.
Yeah.
Tell a good goddamn story.
Oh man, listen, I think about this all the time. I'm still a reader. I'm still a reader. I'm still that guy. I'm still that person reading comics all the time, man. Like, I read comics every day, and you should see my office. We have trades everywhere. I mean, you see this right here. This is nothing. I'm gonna let everybody know. You see this behind me? This is nothing compared to what I have in the rest of this house. We're building a new office for me right now. We're building a new office. It's this huge studio, and it is gonna have like walls of collections of trade paperbacks. And I literally am not joking around when I say I have stacks of comics around me right now.
Bud, why do you think I'm in the dark when I
yeah. What are you going to see? Oh my god. I told you this story before, right? When I was in college one time, a long box of copies of Cable fell and almost killed me, right? We were talking about this before. It was so funny because I was in my room. This is actually right out of college. So I'm in my room and I'm putting up long boxes. And you had a long box, you get them stacked up, right? And I'm organizing my comics, and I had this one long box that was just Cable comics. It was just Cable, and it was just Cable, and I think a couple of Cable appearances, but just Cable. And I had this long box, and I put it at the top, and then I turned around, and I was going through another long box, they'll like organizing, putting stuff away, and all of a sudden that box started coming down.
Oh no!
And I jumped out of the way. I mean, like like a total cartoon character like dived out of the way, and that box hit the ground. All of a sudden, all these copies of Cable just flew into the air. It was like I wish I had filmed it because it was the most ridiculous thing
That's
to be like, I'm jumping out of the way as a long box hits. But so what I'm saying to you is that I get it. Like, I read comics too, and I read them in different forms. There's a couple I read digital because I read a lot of number ones too. Like I try to give a lot of number ones,
Good.
not just Marvel stuff or not just DC stuff, Marvel stuff, Image stuff. You know, like the other day I read Specs. Specs is a new Boom book. I read issue 1, and then I read 2 and 3 like boom because I was like, this book is real good. You know, so I read a lot of comic books. So I get it. I'm in that mindset too. You know, I understand.
That's excellent, man. You know, what is the current DC status quo called? Like Infinite Frontier? And
Oh yeah, it's called Dawn of DC.
Dawn of DC. I got to be honest,
because, you know, the
Go
other
ahead.
side of the dark, you know, Dark Crisis.
Sure. Well, it's like,
Dark Before the
Brightest Day
Dawn.
after Blackest Night and everything. Sure. No,
Yes,
I get it.
yes.
I gotta say though, Josh, because I was really intrigued when Infinite Frontier and our discussion about it was announced. I was really hoping, and maybe we still will see more stories that aren't necessarily continuity based and handcuffed to, because like I can't remember who wrote it. I think Andy Schmidt wrote it, but there was this it was fun. It was a throwaway thing, but there was this 2-issue story where the 1939 Batman and Superboy and all these different eras of DC were all together. And I'm like, as I've said, and again, I'm an old fart. Nobody else wants to read this, but it's like, you know, I would love to see a Superboy in Smallville, Chief Parker, Mod Pie, either on the phone.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah. You know,
maybe that opportunity was there with Infinite Frontier. I don't know if those opportunities are still there. I know.
Without getting into too much spoiler stuff, you know, I don't think. Don't say that it's handcuffed to continuity.
Okay.
We're holding hands with continuity and we're walking together. That's how I see it, you know, because I actually like continuity, you know. I mean, I understand.
I don't mind continuity, but, you know, yeah, if it stands in the way of a good story, that's my own.
Well, that's it. I don't think, you know, you look at the stuff that's going on with Deceased or Dark Knights of Steel, and there's some other projects.
Yes.
In the war.
No, you're right about that.
You know, like our guy, Human Target, you know, with Thomas doing Human Target, you know, it's like, I don't think
Danger Street 2.
It's just a matter of what's that?
Danger Street 2.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I don't think there's necessarily anything blocking those things from happening. It's a matter of someone pitching that. You know, it's a matter of somebody coming in and saying, "Hey, I want to do this. Let's do this." You know, yeah.
Yeah, the guys are saying that maybe it was Generations. Jurgens.
Yeah, I was working on that originally. I was working on the Generations book. I ended up quitting just because my schedule was getting to be too intense. I remember one time I felt bad because I love Dan Jurgens and I really like talking the story with him. And
love Dan too.
Great. And you know, he's like one of my idols, and I really like Dan a lot. And we were working on that with Vin Diddy, and there was originally other writers involved too, but and then Andy Schmidt was on it. And I remember at one point I was so bogged down with my schedule. Like my schedule was so intense that I didn't have time to answer the emails about it. And that's when I was like, I have to step back. And I felt bad. I told him, like, listen, I can't even answer the emails. I can't, you know, like I'm not gonna have time to work on this. And so I took a step back. But yeah, that stuff was really cool because there's actually one of the lead-ins of that was in Detective Comics was 1027, I think. There was a lead into that, and it was Dan Jurgens inked by Nolan, and it just looked. It's one of those things you're like, "Oh, this is amazing!" I was like,
yeah.
You know, it was so cool. I told Dan, I was like, "Dude, this is one of my favorite things you've done in a while." Was that short they did that led into Generations? But
that's cool.
Yeah, when it comes to the out of continuity within continuity, I mean, you know, it can be hard sometimes because it's like, I think at the end of the day. Everyone wants to have their cake and eat it too. Like we want to have a you want to sell a DC universe, and you want to have that continuity, and you want to have those major pieces out there, and you want to feel like it's a cohesive, united universe, right? But you don't want that to get in the way of telling a good story.
Absolutely.
And most of us are capable of navigating right? There's a way of doing it because it's impossible. Like we had like a little mini summit recently talking about some stuff that we're doing in the summer, and I was like, there's no way that you can have it where every comic book take place on the same Monday, right? It's not Monday morning across the line. It's impossible, right?
Of course.
And it's like, I was talking about this with Philip, where it's like the stuff he's doing in action, I'm doing in Superman, and finding places to have that connective tissue, but without, like, use your phrase, hitting each other, right? Like, we don't want to, we want it to be additive, not subtractive. We don't want to mess with each other. And it's like, my first 3 issues of Superman all take place within 24 hours. That's 3 months. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's impossible. That was the example I used. It's like, it's impossible for every book to start on Monday morning. That just isn't the way it's gonna work. But you can navigate, you can find ways. But then it does get really exciting when you can work on something. So, like, for example, I had that book Rogues. It was a Black Label book, and it was like that book took place in its own little pocket and its own little storyline, and I was able to really cut loose and be free in that. And so I understand that the appeal of that. And some of the best stories, and it's actually one of the things to bring it all the way back around to Superman. And I'm not sure if I'm gonna name them or not. There was somebody at DC who used to say that all the best Superman stories were always out of continuity. They were like All-Star Superman out of continuity, Red Sun out of continuity, Birthright out of continuity, like all the best Superman stories out of continuity. And I didn't agree with that, because I would always be like, Death of Superman, like, boom, that's the big, that's one of the biggies. But as somebody who I really like a lot of Silver Age Superman stuff, a lot of Bronze Age Superman stuff, it's like, for me, there are a lot of really great Superman stories that are in continuity. And so I took that challenge with this book of like, okay, let's show there are more in continuity great Superman stories.
Excellent, man.
I don't agree with that necessarily, but it was a very, I remember it was a dinner with a bunch of creators, like, all started talking about this, and it was a really interesting conversation.
I bet.
Always been in the back of my head of like, that is something. So with this, I was like, no, I really want to do really fun, big Superman stories that are also in continuity. And so that, but I get the appeal of it. Like, don't get me wrong, I think about it often, and every once in a while I'm working on books, or even look at something like what Mark Waid is doing in The World's Finest, where it takes place in the past. And you can do an amazing comic like what Mark is doing with World's Finest and have it take place in the past. And that's something that I think we'll also explore down the line.
Magic K wants to know, and regarding Superman, and one of the things I liked about Brian Bendis revealing Clark's identity was that Jimmy was just like, yeah, I know.
Oh yeah, that's the one thing
Magic K wants to know what your take is on Superman and Jimmy.
Yeah, that's the one. That might be the only one that hurts a little bit.
I'm with you. I'm so
because
with you.
Jimmy doesn't know. Yeah, that scene. I remember. I was at Brian's house, actually. I was at Brian's house before that issue came out, and Matt Fraction was actually sitting next to me, who was writing Jimmy at the time. And I remember Matt Fraction was just like, he said the line, like, he said it. He was like, there's only 2 people who call me Jim. Right? It was Clark and Superman. And so, of course, he's not a dummy. He's not. Everyone looks at me, he's like a dummy, but he's not a dummy. And I remember when Matt said that, I was like, that's good, dude. That's real good. So that's actually, I think, the one that hurts a little bit about putting everything back in the bottle, is that Jimmy doesn't remember. But I mean, that's his pal. That's his pal. And I don't write Jimmy. I personally don't feel. I love Jimmy Olsen, and I really like his spirit and his enthusiasm. And it's the same kind of thing with Clark. I think there's a reason why him and Clark are so close is because of their hearts. And it's like, I really want that. But also, he is sort of this, like, I don't know. It's I love writing Jimmy, and I think he's so positive and such a, like, I don't want to keep using the word fun, but it's like in the first issue, he's another character. I had the voice in my head, and I could just hear him, and his kind of I don't know. It's funny because in the first issue, him and Lois are talking, and he's talking about how he has a new girlfriend, and Lois is like, well, is she, the gorilla princess? Is she a rock star? Or what? She starts listing off all the stuff we know Jimmy has dated in Jimmy's career, his lifetime.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then Jimmy like, he married this one, yeah, and he's like, hey, I'm a changed man. However, like, and he's like, she's not a rock star, but she kind of is. She is in a band. Like there's stuff like that. It's fun to write with him.
That's excellent.
Again, that thing, and Lois is also editor-in-chief now of the Daily Planet. That's a part of the story. So
yes,
there's a lot of really fun stuff coming up. But yeah, I really like Jimmy.
Those Daily Planet supporting cast is so important to Superman.
It is, and I think that was another part of why we were putting that particular piece back in the bottle, was that I wanted to get a bit more of that, and show Clark as a reporter, and show Lois as editor-in-chief, but also she's dying to continue being a reporter. Like she feels like Perry White's office is a cage, and it drives her nuts. So yeah. I had this for a long time. I used to call this my Fortress of Solitude glass, because it's a giant glass, but it has a Superman logo on it. Right.
Very nice.
I always call this my Fortress of Solitude glass. Even before I got the job. Yeah.
Radium Theater Productions wants to know your experience planning Dark Crisis, given Bendis was using the Great Darkness in his Justice League Legion of Superheroes crossover. How did you decide Pariah was creating darkness rather than just being infected by it?
So Pariah was always intended to be the villain of Dark Crisis. And then we started talking about the Great Darkness because other people have been seeding it. And then Bendis and I actually got on a call and talked about what I was thinking about doing, and that what Bendis was thinking about doing with Legion of Superheroes. And then the hope was that the Justice League Legion of Superheroes stuff would actually takes place before issue 75. And so the hope was that these things would eventually, if you did read them in order, they would flow together. And then Legion was a little bit later, not for anybody's fault, was a little bit later. But we definitely talked about it early on, and I had kind of forgotten that he had been planning it even back in Legion. But that had been the plan for a while, even going so far back as Metal. There was talk there about the darkness. And if you go and look at some of the stuff we were planning post Metal, when you get into Justice League, and particularly Justice League Dark, and a little bit Odyssey, which we got away from because I ended up not staying on the book for very long. A lot of that was building toward the Great Darkness already. So once Brian was like, "Oh, I'm doing Legion," and I remember asking him, I was like, "Oh, are you doing Great Darkness Saga, or are you doing Great Darkness like Swamp Thing 50?" And so we talked about that a bit and how they were going to be different, but still lead into each other.
Very cool. That's awesome. I know you got to go soon.
We can break through some questions. I can do lightning round. What you got for me?
Well, Zach wants to know what your favorite Superman stories are.
Oh, I have a whole post. I'm going to be doing that on Substack soon. So
that's great.
Well, I'm not gonna. I will say this. I feel like we've had there are some stories that I love, and I'm gonna say I love them. Like obviously, All Star Superman. I think one. It's like the obvious one. So I kind of want to go dig deep and look into some stories. Look at the Hitman issue with Superman, which I think
so good. Another great one shot. Joe Kelly, when he introduces Manchester Black. Justice in the American Way.
Yeah, him and Doug Monkey is a great one,
Yes.
And it's like I look at John Byrne was actually doing Generations as well. Those are some Superman stories that I really love.
Oh, I love Generations. That was a lot of fun. Yes.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah, a lot of fun. And so I'm going to do a post about that soon. It might be next week. It's going to depend on how much work I get done. I have a lot of work to do in the next week. So I'm going to try between now and the release of issue 1 to do a few different posts just about Superman, and that's one of the ones I have planned is a whole thing about all of them, the ones I really love. Yeah, Action 760. I was working at a comic store when
Kelly story, everybody.
Yeah, I was actually working at a comic book store when that came out, and I remember the conversations we all were having in the store, and people really being buzzed about that, and because it was a very meta issue at the same time, because like what was going on with Authority and Ultimates, like that was such a big. So. We definitely talked about that a lot in the store when it came out.
Very cool. Stanley wants to know who your favorite female character is.
For DC, I really like Black Canary a lot. I like Wonder Woman. I like Hawkgirl. But I really like Black Canary. It's a character I always come back around to. I really enjoy. Is that I also really like Zatanna. I haven't really I've only written Zatanna like a little bit, but I really like Black Canary a lot.
That's cool. Excellent. I guess let's wait for next time we talk. Let's try. Honestly, man.
Yeah, we
love
can
having you
again.
back in a couple
Yeah,
weeks. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
whenever it would make sense for whether it's
Yeah.
doing the end of Dark Ride when the trade comes out.
Yeah.
But yeah,
No, we can talk again we could probably talk again in March and
okay,
talk because then Superman #1 will be out, and then we could talk
yeah.
about Arrow some more. We could talk about Black Canary, and there's some other cool stuff coming. I also like Ravager a lot. That's why she was in Robin. Like
Who
so.
do you like? I didn't. Ravager.
Ravager.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
Rose Wilson. Yeah,
Very nice.
What else you got? Fire away with some questions. Give me some lightning round. What you got?
Well, a lot of them are more in depth as far as questions. Let's see.
Oh yeah. Well, I can try.
Well, Casey wants to know: do you miss working in a comic book store?
Sometimes, kind of. Yeah,
right.
I think being on the ground a bit more and knowing what actually is going on and what people are talking about at a comic book store. I kind of miss that. And then
I hear you.
I don't miss. I love my job, so it's.
Well, yeah.
I don't miss like having to. I get to work from home, so I don't miss having to wake up early and go to a job anymore. And but I would say I miss the environment of talking to comic readers in person, which is my preferred.
Nothing like it. And I keep saying this, and again, everybody, sorry, showing my age. I grew up with record stores. I grew up with bookstores.
Yeah.
And really thank God I'm in a city where all that stuff still exists. However, it's not the same. I mean, High Fidelity is a great example of the music shop talk that would happen. And thank God comic book stores, man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get that experience as much as I used to, and so that part I kind of miss a little bit, but not the rest, I guess. I don't miss breaking down boxes. One of the main things I did for a long time working in high school and in college was making bags and boards, like literally taking those boards and putting them in the bags for hours. I don't miss that.
I respect that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to find, there was something about using more of the Wildstorm people, or not Wildstorm, but like, here, Jake wants to know, will we see any of Clark's Authority in your run?
No, and because I feel like that is something that Philip has ownership of because of War World, so I feel like if there's any of the Authority stuff, that'll be over there, in action. When Philip and I were talking about this stuff, we did talk about what I was going to use and what Philip was going to use to make sure we weren't, bumping into each other too much. And I feel like that is something that is very much of Philip's, and so that'll say as well. I saw somebody else ask me or a question earlier about Legion of Superheroes, and without getting too much into spoilers, I do have plans for Legion of Superheroes stuff.
Fantastic.
And stuff that I'm working on. I really love.
So. That's always like the challenge in terms of established relationships that happen in the 20th or 21st century, and all of a sudden there's a new status quo, and you wonder if the Legion is like in those great moments of like Star Trek and other sci-fi things where it's like, wait a minute, I remember that differently, but everybody else knows the new thing. And it's like, why, why isn't that screw? Or maybe Brainiac 5 is the only person that might be immune to the various continuity changes that affect the 21st century.
I think people will be surprised. For me, where you see Legion next on things to work on, it's not going to be where you expect. That's the most I can say. And then we do touch on a little bit of on the idea of people messing with time a little bit. I don't want to get too deep into that, but
I understand.
Yeah.
Josh, honestly, I never want spoilers to.
Oh, it's all right. I know how to walk the line. I know how to do it. I know how to what to spoil and what not to spoil. Yeah.
All right. So you can see all the Legion love that's popping in right now.
That's great. I my favorite Legion is either it depends. It's like a little bit of Keith Giffen, 5-year Legion stuff.
Oh my God.
A little bit of Legionnaire stuff that was like, late 90s. But I mean, really, I'm a 0 Hour kid,
Okay,
because,
sure.
Well, there's a thing. Somebody said this one time. Somebody said this. All right, I've heard this multiple times, that everybody's first Legion is the version of Legion that they came in on, right? And so for me, obviously the age I'm at and what was going on in comics and my own like going to the comic shop every Wednesday sort of thing, having Zero Hour happen, and then all of a sudden it was like, boom, here it is right from the beginning with Mark Waid and Tom Pear, and Chris Sprouse and everybody, and that to me like was such an entry point. It was an entry point into that whole world, and then what was fun about that was that it was kind of like getting that entry point into Legion through 0 Hour. It then made me want to go back and read Legion. And I went and I got all those, man. Remember when they used to have those really beautiful like archive editions?
Yeah.
Dude, I had all of those.
That's great.
I ended up selling them and I kind of regret it, but I had those and I would just read them. And I really love Legion. I've always been curious if Legion was in my future in some form or another, but I do like writing them. And I have thoughts on it without getting into too much spoiler stuff, but I have a lot of thoughts on Legion.
That's awesome, man. No, I've been a fan since I was a little kid, reading reprints of the Jim Shooter, Kurt Swan stuff, and oh god, I can't think of his name now. Bender, Otto Bender.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. I mean, yeah.
I always wanted to do like a big Legion reread, and I feel like that is definitely something that I will probably do. At some point or another. But yeah, I really do love the Legion. But again, the next time you see the Legion, at least something I work on, I think it'll be in a place you'll be surprised by. It won't be obvious.
Last question. Kalai wants to know what happened to Empty Hand regarding Dark Crisis.
With Empty Hand, you have to read the Deadly Green story. Because to me, when we were working on Dark Crisis, part of the idea with the Deadly Green was that the Empty Hand and Upside Down Man, who were very connected to what was going on with the Great Darkness, that was actually when they were freed. So they were freed during that story when you actually saw the hand and you saw. I don't want to get too much of spoilers on that, but I also, with some of that stuff, particularly Deadly Green, because that was written by Alex and Rom and Dan, we left a couple things a little vague on purpose because we didn't want to give you all the answers. We wanted you to kind of interpret a couple things. And so the Empty Hand, that was part of the point of that book, was to have the Empty Hand, the Upside Down Man put back in a different location because they're not necessarily straight up fighters. Like that isn't what they do, right, necessarily. And so I didn't want them to be in this big fight we had later, so that was what we did. We ended up taking them off the board over in the Deadly Green. And that allows someone like Grant to pick up the Empty Hand later if they wanted, or somebody else could pick up that character because it's their character,
I get it. Josh, you're killing it, man. Honestly, way to go. Really intrigued by what's coming up in Superman, Green Arrow.
Do you want to? We can do one more question. I have a minute. What you got? What's another?
All right, here we go. Our Burrow Snake. Any interest in the Milestone characters?
Yes, I love Milestone. That was something that when I was a kid. My parents, before I worked at the comic book store, there was no comic book store nearby me, and we would go to like Target or getting them, off of like a 7-Eleven, but we go to Costco, and Costco would sell comic books in these giant packs, these like bricks, and every month we would go to Costco and I would get one of these bricks, and the bricks were totally out of order because it was random.
Of course they were. Yes,
they were totally random, right? And I mean, you're just talking about like somebody was just taking all of these, because they were printing a lot of books that time period.
Right, it's inventory. Yeah,
they were just taking them and they were just shrink wrapping them, and then they were selling them at Costco. And so for Marvel and DC, that was how I really got into it. It was just like buying these bricks, and it's probably even with Image. Like I didn't get into Image until it was a year. It had been going on for a year before I started getting into Image. But in those packs were Milestone books and all Milestone #1s, and so I was able to get into that. Obviously, Static. Sure. I think my favorite. It goes back and forth. Sometimes my favorite was Hardware, and then sometimes it was Blood Syndicate. It just, I really like Hardware #1 a lot, but I think Blood Syndicate was one that I actually read a little bit more of. But yeah.
I understand, man. No, when I was a kid, it was Whitman or whoever else was bagging, as Casey was just saying, the cover ripped off comics.
Cover ripped off, I have a few of those too.
Yeah, and I mean, and you're right. And okay, you could see two covers, but the middle one was always like, you didn't know. And that's when I saw Hellstorm for the first time and where
Oh
monsters
yeah.
dwell, and some of the other off-brand Marvel. And
Yeah,
stuff.
I think once you get around to 0 hour, that was when I was in the shop every week. I think once you get around to 0 hour, that's when I was buying, because I bought 0 hour when it was coming out weekly. Like I remember going into the comic store.
Sure.
Really, once you get to 92, you start getting more and more, But once you get to 94, I was all in going to the comic shop. Well, I told you so before, but a comic shop had opened nearby me in 92, so that was that part of unlocked stuff. But again, it was like going to Costco and a brick of comics. Like you can't
Come
turn
on.
that down.
Absolutely. Do you remember how much they cost?
I don't. I'm really curious how much they are. It's funny because now when I do go to Costco here, we don't go very often, but when we do go to Costco here, I go and look, and I'm always like, man, it would be awesome to see that. I wish that was still a thing, just like a brick of comics that you could buy
Yeah.
for like bucks. I think that would be really cool. But anyway, what else you got? What's another question?
All right, and in the same vein, I think people were wondering if you wanted to bring Wildstorm characters into any of your projects.
I talk to Matt Rosenberg fairly often. And I did write in the Wildstorm 30th anniversary special, I wrote a story in there about Angel Breaker and Zealot, and I think that there are a couple of Wildstorm characters. I was a big Wildstorm fan too. I actually tried. I've talked about this with Ben Abernathy, who was at Wildstorm, and who's now executive editor at DC Comics. He was an editor at Wildstorm for a while, and so he was aware of this. I tried to get a job as an assistant editor at Wildstorm when it was in La Jolla many times. And I didn't have an experience, so I really, really tried. And so I know Wildstorm stuff really well. I think one of the earliest comic book pitches I wrote actually was for Stormwatch. After, I don't know what year this was. It was John Layman. So John Layman, the creator of Chew.
Of course.
He was an editor at Wildstorm. And he came into the comic book store I worked at, and so we had a couple friends in common, because I'm friends with Dustin Nguyen, and he had worked at Wildstorm.
Okay.
And he had done Jet before that, and I actually met Dustin right after he finished Jet. But so I knew John, and so I would talk to John about like, I want to write comics, and John was like, oh, okay, great, get out of here, kid, kind of thing. But one day, John was like, well, send me a pitch. What do you want to do? I was like, I really want to write Stormwatch, because I really loved Stormwatch. And I liked a lot of their characters. Like, I liked Union. I'm more of a 90s Wildstorm person when it comes to the universe, but there are other things, like when Brubaker was on it, and there's different people who worked on Wildstorm characters. I wrote a Stormwatch pitch, and it was 30 pages long. And I remember turning it into John, and then John emailed me back like an hour later, and he was like, all the email said was, fuck you, I'm not reading that. Because he was like, who turns in a 30-page pitch? Like, now, it's funny, now when I'm doing a book, like a creator-owned book, I have different versions of it, but most of my pitches now are 1 page.
Of course.
Like, to this day, even when I'm pitching like newer books, I'm like, this is maybe 2 pages. Like, when we got into Superman became much longer. Like, Superman was like a 10-page pitch, things like that. You're talking bigger.
Yeah, but you're already in the company and everything, man.
It's a little different, At that point, it's mostly just typing up what we talked about, But with that, I think John was just like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I have a 12-issue plan for Stormwatch, and here's what happens in every single issue, almost every page. I had this whole huge plan for it. But yeah, to answer your question, I talked to Matt, and we did talk about, is there ways of bringing in Wildstorm characters? It's definitely a conversation we have, and like, how do we get Grifter? How do we get Spartan? There are ideas in there on how these things can connect. It's just going to depend on a couple things later in the year.
Are we done, or do you want one more?
I can do one more. Yeah, I can go.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna answer Tom Grimm's one, which is, and then feel free to amplify on this. But he's like, is there a chance we'll see some New Gods soon? And I know Philip is playing with that in action, or
Philip is playing with that. There are some plans. I had a conversation with somebody else that Philip also knows today, actually, and there are some really cool stuff planned for the New Gods. There's some really cool conversations taking place.
And then real fast, I wanted to know if you talked with Grant about Dark Crisis.
I did. I don't want to get too deep into that conversation, but I did talk to Grant about it. I emailed Grant, and I was like, hey, I have a question. And Grant and I have met a few times. I actually met Grant for the first time back in, God, I think 1999. And I met them a few times after that. And so I emailed Grant and was like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing, and would you mind talking on the phone and talking about it? And they emailed me back and I was like, let's talk. And so I pitched them what I was doing and pitched them my thoughts, and then got their advice, because that was part of it. Like, going into a crisis, I wanted to talk to people who had worked on crises before. And so with Grant, I wanted to talk to Grant, and primarily I wanted to talk to Grant about actually in Great Darkness. That was a big thing I wanted to talk to Grant about. And so I was able to ask Grant a lot of questions, annoyingly so, and sort of get their take on some things. But yeah, I did talk to Grant about it. It's funny, when I met Grant for the first time back in 1999, I was actually talking about this with Dennis Culver a couple days ago, and telling him this story that, like, in 1999, I went to San Diego Comic-Con, and I really wanted, I could only go on Sunday, and I had a badge, I had a pass on Sunday. And so I got there, and I got there late on Sunday. It was like 11 o'clock, and you know how close it's at 5 on Sunday, and everything's kind of winding down. And I got there on Sunday, and I got lost trying to get into the convention center. This is back in 1999, so it's different. It's a very different experience than it is now, right?
Smaller show,
right? Completely different. And like, because back then you could see all 4 walls back then, right? You can't now, right? And so I actually ended up in the back I ended up in the loading area.
Oh.
And I walk up to the security guard. I'm like, listen, I have to go to registration. I have the letter, because remember they used to mail you a letter, right? So I'm like, I have the letter. I need to get my badge. Where can I get my badge? And the guy was like, listen, this is how you're going to get there. You can actually cut across. I was in the store. I was in the loading area. He's like, you can actually cut across the entire convention center. On the other side is registration, and you can get your badge. And I was like, great, thank you. And he was like, just cut across, just walk right through. So I'm walking through the convention, and then I stop, and I'm like, wait a minute, I am in the convention center. I am on the floor. There's the DC Comics booth. There was the CrossGen booth. Here's all this stuff. It's right here. I'm here. So I was like, all I got to do is never leave this room. If I never leave this room, I'm going to be fine. So I had a backpack full of books, and I went over and I got stuff signed from every single person, got a crap ton of posters and pins, and and I went over to the DC booth, and I actually met Howard Porter and John Dell, who was an inker. I met them before, but I was on a mission. I was on a mission to meet Grant, and I had a stack of books for Grant, and I had Kill Your Boyfriend, I had Invisibles, I had JLA #1. I had so many books that I had Aztec #1. I was just like, I am going to get this stuff signed. So I waited in line, and I got up there, and I'm sure Grant has a thicker accent. And when you're an 18-year-old kid who has never heard that before, it can be surprising. Yeah.
Sure.
Now when I'm talking to Grant, I can hear it. I can have a full conversation. Actually, when I get Superman #1 is done, and so actually tomorrow I'm going to be sending it. I'm going to email it to Grant. But so I went over to Grant and gave Grant my stack, and Grant signed everything. And then I said to Grant, I was like, I have every comic you've done, all of them, except for one. And it was Aztec 10, and I was like, Aztec 10 had an incredibly low print run. And notoriously was hard to find because Aztec was very underrated and very underordered, and then all of a sudden Aztec was on the Justice League, and so those books were impossible to find. And issue 10 was the issue where they joined the Justice League, and it was like I could never find it. And so I said this to Grant. I said, I have everything you've ever done except for Aztec 10. And then Grant looked up, and Grant said, if I had known you were coming, I would have brought one for you.
Oh,
remember that.
What a sweetheart.
Yeah, such a great place. But so we'll end there. We'll stop there because I feel like that's a good place to end it. Nice, heartwarming story for everybody. We can just stop there. And now I can go eat dinner.
Yes, please. Oh, God, Josh, absolutely. Everybody, you had great questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. But
yeah, I'm really sorry. I mean, listen, if you ever have questions for me, the best place to get them is ask me at a convention. I mean, I have a Twitter account, but I think if you ever get to go to a convention, I know that's really hard. I know it's challenging with everything that's going on in the world, but that's always the best place to ask me questions, or podcasts like this and with John, So if we didn't get to you today, I hope on the next one we do, and then I can try to. One of these days, we should do one of these where I just answer a ton of questions.
Well, honestly, man, I was ready to do that, but again, that we get so many, and unfortunately, yeah, poor Josh, I let you eat, man. That's all right. No, hey, come back in 6 weeks. We'll talk in March.
Yeah, we'll talk again in a little bit. Yeah, that will
All right,
be
buddy.
really, really fun. All right, awesome.
Beautiful.
All right, good night, everybody.
Thank you, my man. Take it
thank
easy.
you so
You can
much.
even leave.
Yeah.
You can even box out. We don't have to have a post show
All right, cool.
chat. Take care, Josh. Thank you,
All right,
everybody.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Sounds good, buddy.
Bye.
Thank you very much. And everybody else that is watching, next time on Word Balloon, tomorrow night, Michael Jan Friedman is going to be by because he's got a new Kickstarter that we're going to talk about. So until then, thanks for your questions. Stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.